jostling that woman 125 yards up the hill, even on a litter. Being carried on a litter is not stable at all, where you could potentially loosen whatever blood clot is holding the whole works together right now.
I don't think we're going to convince Matt.
And potentially getting shot in the back on the way up the hill.
No, you're not going to convince me all that stuff because you save your family. That's what you do. I'm sorry. I'm old-fashioned. I like to save my family from bullets.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide, number 23, or as Bob put it, 103 episodes ago. We started doing these Ask a Guides, and here we are. What are we doing today? Well, as you might be able to tell, we are in a windy place. There might be cars going by. That is because we are sitting around the Jennie Wade statue at the Jennie Wade House. And we are doing an Ask a Guide about Jennie Wade and Jack Skelly and all of that stuff. Right, Bob?
That's right.
That's it? That's all you had to add?
Well, you didn't introduce me as the co-host.
Well, that was my introduction. People know you're the co-host by now, Bob.
Okay, but I'm not sure I'm co-hosting this one until I'm skeptical until I see where this is going.
See, Bob has this weird thing in his head. Tim Smith is also here with us again. Hello, Tim. Bob's got this thing in his head that we're going to somehow mock Jennie Wade. And why would we go to the Jennie Wade house to mock Jennie Wade? Because we have our crazy conspiracy theories about Jenny stuff.
Yeah, see, when you start saying conspiracy theory, and I know you well enough, I've known you for 15 years, that's when I start getting a little bit concerned.
But you've heard mine, and it's brilliant. And it makes a lot of
Matt,
sense.
you're always brilliant.
Well, I don't know about that. Anyway, our guest today is Cindy Small. Hello, Cindy. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. I've heard a lot about you, and it's great to finally meet you. Put a face to the name.
Thank you.
And you are the foremost expert on Jennie Wade, they say on Wikipedia. No, I just made that up. But you,
I was just as surprised as everyone else at that.
I'm saying you're the foremost expert on Jennie Wade.
Thank you.
But before we get into everything, I'd like to remind you all that October 17th, we have our last Get Out of the Car tour. It is free for everybody. We start at the North Carolina Monument at 10 a.m., and it's a very special one because we will also be shooting for the Today Show. And that should be a train wreck, perhaps. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it all comes out in the wash. But so yeah, there's that, and also to our patrons out there, you might have noticed. Well, everybody really. There's been a bit of a slowdown in content in the last month and a half or so. We've been working on our new studio, which is almost finished and should be done in the next week or two. And then we're going to hit the ground running with new shows. We're going to start doing live shows on Facebook and YouTube. That would include Ask a Guides, and we'll have some audience participation in that. Maybe even call in, Bob. I don't know. With modern technology, you could do anything.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And then also, we want to make sure that we thank you for making September the month that had the highest downloads so far. And it's been going up every month, but we had a lot of them over in September. So thank you all very much for doing that.
I'm going to make an announcement, too, that you know nothing about, but we did talk about it.
Okay.
We didn't authorize it. You didn't. But listeners, send in your spooky, eerie stories about paranormal encounters on the Gettysburg battlefield.
Yes.
I'm trying to talk Matt into doing a special live.
Oh, I like this idea.
Halloween.
So listeners send in their goofy ghost stories, and then we read them in front of the campfire.
Yeah.
I'll roll my eyes, and then we'll also tell our
encounter. Oh, man. Remember that one?
Oh, boy.
Railroad cut? Oh, man. All right.
Okay. So that's it.
And Matt, you didn't introduce our guide guest today. Were you about to do that?
Yeah, I already did, Bob.
Yeah, okay, I'll stop being interrupting now. I just saw those presidential debates recently.
And let's thank also Mike Stretch, ladies and gentlemen, for the work that he's done on our new logo, which is going to be coming out soon. If you need a logo or any graphic design, check out heritage-depot.com and contact him there. I'm telling you, this guy does great work. You're going to see our new logo, and you're going to love it. It'll make you cry. It's so beautiful. And so that's it. So heritage-depot.com. Contact him through there and hire him for all your logo and graphic design needs. Okay, we've introduced our usual suspects. We've introduced our guests. And now let's get into the background of the Wade family. What, Bob? Yes, Mr.
Welcome,
Trump.
Tim Smith. He is our guest guide today. I don't think we really did
him
introduce
in the beginning.
Did we, Tim? Okay.
Yeah, they know I'm here.
Okay. Tim is here. We do have someone who
knowing
knows
the topic,
something.
I think everybody realized I'd be here.
I already said Tim.
Okay.
I acknowledged him before. See, it's not the first show we're doing, Bob. It's the 23rd, and so you don't need to always. I've done this before. Relax. All right, so. Let's go to our guest first here. Well, Tim and guest, both of you guys, you tell me how you want to do it. Let's get a background on the Wade family. Do we know when they first arrived here in Gettysburg?
Well, what's interesting about this is that, we don't really know much about James Wade prior to his arrival in Gettysburg. There's a simple answer and a more complicated answer. One thing I should mention is that there is a biography of the Wade family given in John White Johnston's book, The True Story of Jennie Wade. And that biography is partly based on a biography that was given to him by Georgia's sister, Georgia. And I assume that information came from her mother about her father's family. And, I do work as sort of a professional genealogist, helping people at the Adams County Historical Society. And so I have, in recent years, taken the genealogy that the Wades have provided us in the accounts, John White Johnston's book, and in actually a history of Crawford County, Iowa. There's a little history of the Wade family there in 1876. And
so
pretty much the genealogy they give.
Pre-Civil War, there's a history of post-Civil War.
1876.
Oh, 1876.
When Wade family moved to Iowa. But pretty much the genealogy they give in that there's different versions is not provable and easily disproven. So there's some issues with that. But one thing you should know is James Wade's born in 1814, and we know that he's born in James City County, Virginia, which is basically Jamestown, or right around Jamestown. He makes his first appearance in Adams County that I can determine in 1838, when he's arrested for fornication and bastardy. And he lives in Bendersville. He's actually found innocent of the charges of fornication and bastardy at the point of a gun. But the child is named Wade, and throughout his life, he's acknowledged as James Wade's son.
For people that don't know the old terms for things, fornication and bastardy, what does that mean?
Well, they had a child out of wedlock.
Okay.
Yeah. And in this case, the charges stem from the fact that he basically raped a girl.
Gotcha.
With force of, a gun. But he didn't marry that girl, but the son has his name, John Wade, and or James Wade, I should say. And in 1840, he marries Mary Philby. And she is kind of interesting. We know a little bit about her background. In some early histories of the family, they say that her father's from York, and her family's from York. But the issue with that is that Adams County was York County prior to 1800. And in fact, her father, Samuel Wade, is from York, I believe from the city of York in York County, Pennsylvania. And he moves here in the 1820s. But her mother is a DeGroft, and she is related to the Low Dutch families of Adams County. And when her would be Jennie Wade's grandmother, Mary Wade's mother, dies, it's stated that she's like the oldest resident of Adams County, and she was born in Cumberland or Mount Joy Township near the line in the old DeGroft farm. which is part of the Low Dutch community. And the de Graaf family probably came into this area in the 1760s. So maybe on her father's side, he's from Virginia, and he moved into this area later. But her mother, she's related to some of the early settlers of the, South Central Pennsylvania. Now, in 1840, Mary Philby and James Wade marry, and they're married in Bendersville. And in the 1840 census, they are living in Bendersville. And in 1841, James Wade's arrested again for burning a stable of Charles Myers Tavern in downtown Bendersville.
Eric lives right by that.
Which, was right where Eric lives.
Bendersville's, what, 10 miles north of us?
Yes, Bendersville, 10 miles north of here. He spends about 3 months in jail. It's interesting, while he's in jail, his wife gives birth to their first child, Georgia. And according to the accounts, Georgia is born in the Philby house, which is not too far from us on what is now Steinway Avenue. The house no longer stands, a couple hundred yards away from us. And so apparently while he's in jail, that's when, they take up residence in the town. He does get out after 3 months. There is kind of a trial about the burning of the stable, and he's found innocent. But he, jail time served. He tries to sue the guy who testified against him for the incarceration, and it's a long, drawn-out fiasco. But in the end, James Wade takes up residence in Gettysburg. We would imagine about 1841.
Okay. Where is he in jail when he is it locally?
The Adams County Jail is in Gettysburg at that time on High Street.
Okay.
And for a time after, James is a very respectable businessman in town. There are advertisements in the paper. He has a tailor shop. He actually is the vice president and secretary of a temperance organization out of the town. And for a while, he's doing pretty well. It does appear that his problems with the law did stem from drinking too much. And, he's drunk when he burns down the stable, and some other fights he gets into. And at one point, about 1842, I believe it is, he actually is a captain of a local state militia organization here. Huh. So for a time, he's respected Gettysburg citizen.
So then what happens with that he becomes not respected?
Actually, Tim, I was just going to say, it sounds as though he was a good citizen, but I was just about to ask if maybe you had more detail on a couple of facts that I have. I have some basic facts, but you seem to have drilled down on more information. A couple of bits and pieces that I have here are that in 1841 he was accused of arson. Those charges were dropped. This man seems to have a bit of a
black cloud.
Well, no, he has a way where he is accused of things, but then it doesn't stick in some cases.
Teflon.
That was one in particular. The charges were dropped. One of the charges were dropped, but for 2 others he was found guilty. And then later, between 42 and 50, or around 50, he was indicted for felony charges of larceny. So tell me a little bit. It's kind of curious to hear how he can be a good citizen and then still have some of these run-ins with the law.
I like it.
Yeah, well, one thing, the records that we have available to us about these incidents pertaining to him come to us from the Adams County Courthouse, and there's not a lot of details there's not any trial transcripts or anything like that, but we have listed in the books, we have the jailer's list, and you can see he's in the jail. He's listed as being in the jail. We have Commonwealth versus cases where somebody accuses us of something. We have the indictment, and where he's brought before the court. And then sometimes there's in the judgment book you can see, and a lot of these times it's time served. So they're not like, if you commit a crime, they're not like going to lock you away. You've been in jail for 2 weeks. You come before the judge, and they listen to what you say, and then they let you out. So, but I did notice that, too, when I was first looking at them. Like, he beats somebody up, assault and battery, and then the charges are dropped. And then a year later, he's in trouble again, and the charges are dropped. So I think that when he's not drinking, he is a very reasonable person and a very likable person. And when he's drinking, he is not.
So that credibility that he's built helps to ease his way out of that. This is fascinating for me because I did some of the core study for my book, but that was years ago, and Tim has done additional studies. So I do have another question, if I could even act as the interviewer for a second for Tim. And that is, I know in 1852, Mary Philby took action to have James declared insane. And then his next residence was the almshouse, where I believe he spent out the rest of his years. Was there any episode in particular that prompted that?
Yeah, and what had happened was, now, when you read it in the newspaper, I guess there's two takes on it. They don't make it sound as bad as it probably is. But there's a guy who lives south of Gettysburg. His name is Samuel Durobro. And he is going to the town, and he's going to put some money in the bank. And when he gets to the bank, the money is not in his pocket. The suggestion later is that James Wade finds $300 that fell out of Samuel Durobro's pocket.
Yeah.
But when you read some of the accounts on him, it could be that when they say he fell out of his pocket and found on the sidewalk, that they're being generous in their description of exactly how he obtained the money.
Like when they say, I got this TV, it fell off the back of a truck.
Yeah, and so what ends up happening is this money's missing, and then they hear that James Wade has disappeared, and the newspaper says he's having a flourish in Baltimore. So they end up sending the sheriff and I think maybe one of the constables down to Baltimore to try to find him. And they actually locate him in Washington, D.C. And I think they said he still had a couple hundred of the dollars on him, but he had spent some of it. So they hold him back to Gettysburg. They put him on trial. And I think it's November of 1950, he's found guilty and sentenced to 2 years in the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. This is a serious place, and I have been there. I don't know if the other people have been there. Yeah, a lot of us have been there. They give tours of that place. I do understand that they have lists of when people are admitted. And I would love to go there and see if I could research James Wade's stay there. I don't know if they have like cards that maybe give his date of birth or something to help us more in finding out about him there. So I've been there, but at the time I didn't go to their archives and look into this.
Is that where where Al Capone was kept to?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now he's only there for about a year, and he's sentenced for 2 years. Because he is admitted, and he said actually enters the jail in early 1851, and in early 1852, his wife has him by the Adams County Court declared insane, and that's when, he ends up spending the rest of his life in the Adams County almshouse. And in the 1860 census, he's listed as very insane. And, I don't know if some of the listeners know that we do these Facebook Lives at the Adams County Historical Society. About 2 months ago, we did one on the Adams County Almshouse. And there's a great description how the prisoners are chained to the wall or have leg irons chained around them in the basement, the insane people. And so theoretically, he's there during the battle. And it's kind of disturbing. Now, one thing I question, and I honestly wonder this. I'm not just saying this to be funny, but he has a couple children after his jail time, and one of them, I guess it's Harry Marion Wade, is born in like 1855 while he's in the almshouse. Do they have conjugal visits?
I guess. How does that happen?
There was a baptismal record for him in either the St. James or the Reformed Church records, Trinity. And in the church record, it does give James Wade's name as the father.
These are other bastards. These aren't with Jenny's mom.
No, these are with Jenny's mom.
Oh, they are.
How old would she have been? Do we know when Jenny's mom was born?
I think I think it's 1820. I think off the top of my head.
So they're in their 20s.
Yeah, I don't have all my...
Are we in the 50s or the 40s yet? Where are we?
1850s is when he's in the almshouse.
Jenny's mom was a DeGroft. Is that what I heard you say?
Jennie Wade's mom is a Philby.
A Philby, okay.
Philby, sometimes spelled Phiby. But Jennie Wade's grandmother is a DeGroft.
Is a DeGroft, okay. And she was Low Dutch.
Good Low Dutch, Adams County name.
Okay. I am Dutch, Netherlands, close to the sea, the dikes.
Pull the mic away.
Explain the word Low Dutch.
Pull the mic away when you're screaming like that.
Explain the word.
Dutch
The microphones are picking you up
people
well.
From Holland that migrated to the United States and settled first in New Jersey and New York, and then later a bunch of them moved into this area of Pennsylvania. And the Low Dutch were prominent in this area around the time of the Revolution up until the early 1800s. Mm-hmm. But most of the families dispersed. A lot of them moved farther west. Mm-hmm. But it's not Deutsch, as Pennsylvania Dutch is Pennsylvania Deutsch. It's Dutch. They're Holland. They're from the Netherlands.
Yeah. I went to school with and taught many DeGrofts.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
From New Jersey, and there were Dutch immigrants out in Iowa as well, and Southern California even. I used to teach them. So I just want to make sure people understand when you hear Dutch, it's not the same damn Dutch or flying Dutch that you hear of the German Americans of the 11th Corps, and that also populated this area even more so a little bit later.
Yeah.
A couple more things I should mention about this, and I'll get to the main point here, is that Jennie Wade's grandfather, Samuel Philby, when he dies, is listed as insane. And Jenny's so
her mother has
uncle,
a thing for crazy guys.
Yeah, and Jenny's uncle, Thaddeus Philby, is incarcerated in the Adams County Jail for beating his wife, and he has several illegitimate children, or he has, I shouldn't say several, he has illegitimate children. One of his cousins has some serious problems with the law in Frederick. The reputation that her family, and specifically her father, gained for her will actually affect her popularity and notoriety, especially in our local community after the death of Jennie Wade and during the period when people around town are being asked about Jennie, and they're promoting the idea that she was a heroic civilian that died during the battle. And I just think that's unfortunate.
So how were the Wades viewed in Gettysburg by their fellow citizens, their neighbors? Did they get along with people? Were they looked at as kind of trashy people? Were they rich? Were they middle class, poor? What were they?
I'll start out, and then I know Tim can help fill in. But I would say there were mixed. It sounds as though there were mixed reviews.
Okay.
I mean, certainly you have the trail of their father's reputation always haunting them,
right.
And yet Jenny's mother, her sister, Jenny herself, were very hard-working people. They were seamstresses, milliners. They knew many people, tailors, many people in the town, and worked for them. They had some boarders, so they were tied in with families. They had credibility in keeping other people's children. But it seemed as though any time there was someone who perhaps would be jealous or would read into Jenny's character, it wasn't so much. I could not find facts where there were specific deeds or actions that Jenny took that would be attributed to Jenny that would affect her character directly. It seemed as though it was the ghost of her father's reputation. And I find it interesting, as you heard Tim talk, about the good standing that her father had in town.
Yeah.
It seemed as though that ended up fading away in people's memories when they ended up talking about Jenny or Mary Philby. I'll give you another example where I feel that her reputation in town was misjudged, and that is the winter before the Battle of Gettysburg. There were soldiers wintering over here And Jennie and her mother and her sister took time to make sure that their uniforms, they were in good shape. They mended for them. They cooked them meals. Jennie even invited some of them to go to church with her. People misread those good deeds.
Yes.
Those were kind deeds. Those were, by anyone else's standards, someone being a generous neighbor and making outsiders feel at home.
Good Christian.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they were those were parts of the little cracks or fractures in Jennie's reputation that I think started some of the rumors about her moral character.
If her father wasn't her father, then maybe not. But because her father was her father, then
yes.
She's a loose woman.
Yes, and as someone who was trying to find facts, and at the time that I was digging through my research, I could not find particular episodes in journals or letters or diaries that were specific to Jennie's character.
So let me ask you this.
And so I tend to defend her.
Okay.
More so just because, show me the facts.
Right. Just pull that, when talk a little closer, yeah. So let me ask you this. Tilly Pierce, in that episode when Sam gets captured, Sam Wade, Jennie's brother, gets captured by White's cavalry, she tells a story of Jennie standing on the corner, kind of yelling at her mom, like, I don't know what would have happened to you folks if something happened to Sam, or something to that effect. To me, that's I'm picturing like a guest on Jerry Springer. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing. So is that is Tilly? Do we believe this, or what's? Is Tilly just kind of like she didn't like the girl to begin with and felt she was better than her, and so she's kind of misrepresenting her? What do you think on that? Like, what's your?
In that sense, I would say yes. It was you look at these. They're young women. They're 17, 18, 19. It's a small town. There are different situations of vying for male attention. There are new soldiers coming into town. There was even a particular moment when a militia unit was riding through the town, and Jennie and some of the young women, came out to welcome them and hail them, and Jennie wasn't there. And Jennie was criticized as being a Southern sympathizer for not showing up, when in reality she was back in the house mending her brother's uniform so that he indeed could go out and serve.
So this girl couldn't win no matter what she did.
Right.
Okay. Catty. So that's, and would they be like more lower class people? Were they financially? I mean,
in terms
like
of
they're
financial
poor?
and social status in the town, yes.
Okay.
You know what's interesting, Cindy, that I've been trying to figure out. So they have to make ends meet. Their dad's in the insane asylum. The girls, Georgia and Jennie, do what they can to help their family, and their mother works. She even takes in a young boy in town and gets paid to care for a guy that is with him when Jennie's killed, Isaac Brinkerhoff. But they are able somehow to purchase a house on Breckenridge Street in the 1850s, and they own their own home. One of their employees, Jack Skelly's father, Johnston H. Skelly, he doesn't own his own home. He rents around town. I'm always puzzled. I don't know that looking at her family, if they came into money somehow because of inheritance or something like that. But they were able to scratch together money and buy a very small house, house on Breckenridge Street. When you see it today, it's got a lot of additions onto it, but it was a small house at the time. And Jennie and her mother and her family live in that house.
Yeah, now it's a White House. It's got a plaque on it, right?
This is a little bit out of order, but I think at this point, since we're talking about this subject, we should mention that most of the criticism and bad mouthing or picking on Jennie Wade, it comes about after the Civil War, when Jennie Wade is being promoted as a Civil War heroine. And I think what happened was, a lot of locals cared for wounded soldiers. A lot of the locals, like, Elizabeth Thorne, buried the dead. And they baked bread for the soldiers during the fighting. And Jennie Wade, what did she do?
Died.
She was accidentally killed.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of the people in the town don't like the fact that she is the one that's being promoted as the Gettysburg heroine. She is the representative
and
of
all she did was
the
die.
other civilians in Gettysburg that helped, the armies while they were here. And people, they're upset. Why can't everybody get credit for helping the soldiers? And number two, maybe they don't really think Jennie Wade should be the representative of all the people. And that's where some of this is coming from.
But does it also a little bit come from John Burns, too? Doesn't he?
Yeah, well, keep in mind that John Burns, who does badmouth her in a letter in 1866, he is the constable in the town of Gettysburg at the, for on and off for the years that James Wade seems to be.
So he's had run-ins with her dad. Yeah.
So I'm sure John Burns doesn't like Jennie Wade's father much more than he cares about Jennie Wade one way or another.
But then he actually goes out and fights in the battle and gets wounded.
Yeah, and he's upset because people will stop him on the street. You're that John Burns. How about that Jennie Wade? Tell us about her.
So he
doesn't enjoy sharing the limelight. That's for sure.
Yes.
He doesn't outright say that she was.
No, he does outright. say
he does.
Yeah.
What does he say?
In his letter, in 1866, when somebody asked him about... a guy was writing a book called Women of the War, a guy named Frank Moore. And he wrote a letter to Gettysburg, and he didn't know anybody here, so he just wrote it to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, John Burns. And he asked him questions about Jennie Wade because he wanted to include something about her in his book. And his book, it did come out, and it's a really nice book about stories of women who sacrificed during the war, who were nurses, who were in tragic situations. And he wanted to talk about Jennie. And John Burns said something like, I see if I can remember exactly. Jennie Wade, the least said about her, the better. The story about her being killed or baking bread for the soldiers is all fiction. And then he says something like, charity to her reputation forbids any further remarks.
Jesus.
I called her a she-rebel.
Oh, God. This guy's like,
they're actually quotes from his letter.
He's like 70-something at that point, isn't he?
But Jenny's getting in his way.
But God, she's like 21.
I think in addition to that, he took one step farther and said, ask anyone else in town about her reputation, as if just to share the feeling, the sentiment is far and wide. And remember, too, at that time that Frank Moore was writing, that there were poems written about Jennie, there were songs written about her. It wasn't just a couple of newspaper articles, but there was a groundswell of adoration for her, and she was gone. He was still alive, walking around with his war wounds, and he wanted to carry that torch.
Yeah, he's an actual hero.
There's an interesting thing about this I found recently. Do you remember when we were just talking about ask anybody around town? Do you remember one of the quotes is, ask Postmaster Beeler?
Yes. What was that, Tim?
David Beeler, the Beelers are also the former editors of the Gettysburg Star. And the editor at the time of the battle is John T. McElhaney, who's best friends with Beeler. And in 1863, in like December, the Harrisburg newspaper wants to start up a drive to put up a monument to Jennie Wade. And they say because she's the only sacrifice the town of Gettysburg made on the altar of freedom. And it's kind of a backhanded slap at the people in Gettysburg. And Postmaster Beeler and John T. McElhaney have a letter in early 1864 in the Star and Banner where they say that Jennie Wade's story is not true, and they're trying to push this. So it's interesting that I guess we could look at it in a bunch of different ways, but some of the people in town don't like the fact that Jennie Wade is given a lot of attention after the Civil War, or after, I should say, the battle, even before the war's over, and that she's gaining such great notoriety.
Yeah, people can be that way. So do you want to add something to that?
I was just going to say, and then when you fast forward to today in 2020, when you come to Gettysburg, there is still there's still a level of interest, no doubt, primarily by women who find a connection with Jennie's story. You know, oftentimes when they come to Gettysburg, they may not have a specific interest of the actual troop movements, or maybe they do. But I have found, as being an author of one of the Jennie Wade books, that young girls, when they come to Gettysburg, find that they can identify with Jennie's story. It's more of a human interest story where they can empathize with the question of, if this happens to me in my town, what would I do? Would I have left? Would I go down to the cellar? Or would I come back up to the kitchen and continue to bake bread and to bake biscuits? And so there are some questions that they can get into where they really don't have to get too strategic or talk about military leadership if they don't want to.
Right.
And so still the story of Jennie Wade continues to live on because our interests change, and more people continue to come to Gettysburg and are interested in human interest stories as well.
And you just mentioned your book, and I forgot to mention it at the beginning, and I'll mention it again at the end. What's the name of your book?
The Jennie Wade Story.
Okay, by Cindy Small, but we'll get to that at the end. So, okay, so let's get now, 1863, battle's coming. Where are the Wades? What's their situation like? What are they doing professionally? We said that Jennie and her mom and brother, I think, live up on Breckenridge. Is that right?
Yeah, a few brothers.
A few brothers, okay. And then her sister Georgia lives here. What are they doing for a living? Is Georgia just a housewife? What's Jennie doing? Go ahead.
Okay. So we should mention that Georgia Wade McClellan is married in 1862 to Georgia Wade. She's married. It's Georgia Ann Wade, I believe.
Yeah.
She's married to John Lewis McClellan, and he's actually the son of a bastard. He's a bastard child, I should say. He's the son of John George. Let me think here for a second. George. No, it's George and John McClellan. So it's John McClellan of the McClellan House, who owns a Hotel Gettysburg. He had several children out of wedlock, and they're married. And Georgia moves out of the house, and Georgia, at some point, rents this half of the duplex that we're sitting in front of, a house that we kind of believe is built in about 1842. I don't know if that comes up a lot in discussion. The house at the time of the battle that they rent is owned by John Houck, the same man who owns Devil's Den.
Yeah.
For many years, Houck and McCurry had a brickyard in town, and in the 1840s, undoubtedly, the bricks of the Jennie Wade House are just made at the Houck and McCurry brickyard just down the bottom of the hill here.
Okay.
And so they move into this house, and they're living here in the summer of 1863. John Lewis McClellan, Georgia's husband, is in the Army. And he is in the 165th Pennsylvania drafted militia. And he goes in the men in that unit are drafted in October of 62. In December, they leave the area. And at the time of the Civil War, George's husband is not here. Now, George is pregnant. And, of course, many of the listeners probably know the story. Georgia gives birth to a child on June 26th, 1863, Kenneth Lewis McClellan. And, many stories after the war are that he's the youngest Gettysburg veteran. Although we argue about that. There's a couple other girls that had babies about the same time in town that, depending on how we count them, they're probably a little younger. But he's one of the youngest people to be here during the battle. Now, according to the story, Georgia is having some problems with the pregnancy, and so her mother comes up here from the Breckenridge home to stay with her. They actually take a bed upstairs and they move it downstairs, and so Georgia is in the parlor at the time of the battle with the young child. And Jennie comes up to be with her mother and sister here during the fighting. So on July 1st, they all move into this house. Now, besides the fact that Jennie is here and George is here with the young child and the mother, we also have Samuel Wade, theoretically, we don't. That's a good question. You don't read much about if Samuel's here or not. There's another young child, Harry. He's here, and a crippled boy I mentioned earlier, Isaac Brinkerhoff, is also here in the house. And one of the brothers. And I think this is John James Wade off the top of my head. He's in the 26th. He's actually in the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry. And on June 26th, he's the one who Jenny's mending his uniform, and he flees to town with the rest of the cavalry unit. So there's quite a few other individuals involved in this story. And I should mention that the Jennie Wade House is a duplex, and Georgia lives on the north side of the house. And on the south side of the house, Mrs. Isaac McLean lives with her 4 children and her father and her husband.
Jeez.
Isaac McLean had just died less than a month earlier, or just a little more than a month, I should say. And he died in Virginia as a member of the 165th Pennsylvania Militia, also the same unit that John Lewis McClellan's in. So there's quite a number of people in this house.
So when we talked about this on Patreon back over the winter, one thing that really irked me and no one has given me an answer to, and maybe you can help with this, Cindy, why in the hell are they here in this house when the battle is underway? Now, I understand, it starts northwest of town, and so maybe let's get out of town and let's get down here. It's safer. It's out of town, but it's not out of town enough. The Union Army has its lines right through here. No one makes an attempt to move these vulnerable people?
And were both families here?
Both families were here.
During the battle?
During the battle.
But the other family, weren't they in the basement?
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, okay.
At least later they all go to the basement.
Yeah, well, yeah, after the girl dies, right?
Well,
Okay.
Matt, you actually answered the question yourself. They were as they were hearing the news and hearing the sounds of the activity of the soldiers, they were moving. They felt they were moving away from it to a safer spot. So to them, the south side of town was the safer place to go.
On the first day.
It's all nice and neat and clean when we look back as to where those lines were. But in those days, those families, this is the first battle they had experienced in their town. They couldn't figure that out.
But wait. So, but there's soldiers in the house at some point, correct? Upstairs?
Well, maybe during the action, not through most of the battle, there's no soldiers in the house. We know that there's soldiers in the house after the families go to the basement, and Georgia does say that soldiers came running from upstairs after Jenny was killed. And this leads into a whole thing of, are there soldiers up in the attic firing out the roof? Are there soldiers up in the window here firing down the street? Possibly. Let me hit you with this in this question. So I've done a lot of research on the other civilian accounts in this area, and Elizabeth Thorne, who lives in the gatehouse on top of Cemetery Hill, she was ordered out of her house by the soldiers.
This is what I'm saying.
And escorted down the road.
Right.
In the Wagon Hotel, which sat just behind me over here where the convenience store now is, David Blueball and his wife, who's the daughter of Conrad Snyder, whose house was right beside us, they were ordered and physically removed from the premises by soldiers.
Thank you. This is my point, Tim.
But for whatever reason, these families were not moved. Now, the simple answer is that Georgia was having problems with the pregnancy and couldn't really be moved that well. Now, the other thing is the door to get out of the house on the north side of the house faces the town where there's a violent sharpshooter action. And to get in the cellar door is on that side of the house. So if they did it during the fighting, they would have had to open up the door, and there would be a lot of danger getting the family out. Now, why didn't they do it at night? Or, especially on the night of July 2nd, for whatever reason, they were not moved from the house, and that led to the death of Jennie Wade.
Yeah.
Well, let me hit you with this, too, because our listeners probably don't know. The house sits on a little rise of ground, and we know there's a little rise of ground here at the time of the battle. There are photographs taken from right over here in front of the house of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address procession leading up the street. And maybe the listeners for homework can get on LOC.gov.
Oh, yeah.
And download one of those photographs. And you'll see that there's a hill and then there's a big meadow. The Holiday Inn was not here at the time of the battle.
Right.
and beyond it, the edge of the town is a little bit farther back. So we're talking about the southern edge of town being filled with southern sharpshooters, and this house sitting on top of a little hill with a door exposed to the sharpshooters that are firing up the hill. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, they didn't have the Holiday Inn to use as protection.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, Cindy wouldn't. I'm sorry, I cut off Cindy.
No.
But no, Cindy, do you see my frustration with the whole thing? Is that Tim has given us, and I'm not holding you accountable by any means here, but Tim has given us examples of the Army forcibly moving people out, telling people to leave their homes. Nothing here. What do you make of that? I mean, have you come across anything that says that at least an attempt was made or anything?
I have not come across any accounts specifically from the soldiers who were here outside of the building. Nothing in journals, nothing that actually, no facts, no. The only speculation would be, first of all, although you can see some continuity, that doesn't assure that every house, everything happened the same. One variable that was happening in this side of the house is the birth of the baby, a newborn baby. It could have been, but this is speculation, that this family dug in and said, "We can't move.
Yeah.
We have this brand new baby here. I'm staying here."
Okay.
And if that, then it's in modern terms, it's a done deal. They decided that, and it almost seemed as if those soldiers who were around this house, who moved from the town back up to this hill and were in the area of this house, it almost seemed as though they created a barrier of protection around the house once the family, for whatever reason, dug in and didn't move.
I hate to drag this on, but one last thing that really, when I've looked into this question you asked, is something that a lot of people are fascinated with. Why? Well, here's another thing that really hurts, or leads to Jennie Wade's death, is that the northern units that were here on July 2nd are not the same units that were here on July 3rd. Right. The regiment shifted troops in and out and back and forth. And at the edge of the town, the Louisiana Tigers, after their charge on East Cemetery Hill, regrouped at the edge of the town, and totally new units were sent into the edge of the town. And the Alabama Battalion of Sharpshooters under Eugene Blackford were sent to the town on the morning of July 3rd. So when daylight erupts on July 3rd, the people at the edge of the town are not the same ones that were there the night before, and the people around this house are not the same ones that were here the night before. Okay. And I bet you no one knows that the family's in that house.
Oh, all right. The plot thickens.
Tim, what are the Union units there then on the morning of July 3rd?
Well, we know the 73rd Pennsylvania is in the hotel, and there's a specific account that not only they're in a hotel, but they have units that are shifted over here onto the other side. The 17th Connecticut was just on top of the hill, and we know that at some point they were skirmishing in the edge of the town. So they're mostly from von Gilsa's brigade and Koster's brigade, and maybe some from Krasinowski's brigade, but I don't think they would have been over this far. Now, this action that occurs here on July 2nd and 3rd, the sharpshooter action, is just part of a larger sharpshooter action that's taking place all over the edge of the town. Andrew Harris's brigade of Ohioans is just behind the Jennie Wade House. And on July 2nd, they're skirmishing with Louisiana Tigers that are in the brickyard out near where the junior high school is, and Georgia troops at the edge of the town. And again, on the third day, it's Eugene Blackford's Alabama sharpshooters. But the Union units are shifted in and out and back and forth. Companies. I think there's a company on 106 Pennsylvania I remember is here. Did I say 106? That doesn't sound right. Maybe the 106 has a detachment on East Cemetery Hill from the 2nd Army Corps too, but mostly the 11th Corps units that are shifted in and out. And I think Cindy brought up something really interesting. I don't have a single account of a sharpshooter around the house at the time of Jennie Wade's death. It would be interesting to get an account from one of the soldiers that was here.
Yeah, it would be.
So they're not using this as a barrier from the sharpshooter fire from the Confederates?
And here's the other thing that I would, in this discussion we're having here, I like to point out that Jennie Wade is not killed by a stray bullet fired by a single sharpshooter. So that's how it's presented a lot of times. That the family's in the house, sharpshooters at the edge of the town, a stray bullet comes up the street, goes through the door, hits her in the back, and she's killed instantly. No, she's killed in the midst of a violent sharpshooter action where there are dozens, if not hundreds, of sharpshooters across the side of this hill, and dozens, if not hundreds, of Confederate sharpshooters all over the edge of the town.
But is
And
it
this
not
house-
likely that some of that Union skirmish line was behind this house?
Oh, yeah, it goes all across. And
So
on
the
both
bullet
sides.
is intended probably for a
Yeah,
Union.
so the bullet's definitely intended for
Right.
the Union sharpshooters. And you can imagine somebody running across in front of the door.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but,
and I know
uh,
a few of the Union soldiers had said that they were concerned that they were drawing fire. Some of who did know that the family was inside because they had been given water by Jennie
Yeah.
and food
Yeah.
and had helped to bring in some wood, that they were drawing fire and putting the family in jeopardy. Some of them were concerned of that, but this was also where they were caught.
So there was a firefight going on while she's in the kitchen baking bread, and her sister's laying in the bed in the next room.
Yeah. So just to give you the basic story is that in the early morning of July 3rd, Jennie and the family were in the house, and the family had been asked by the soldiers if they had anything to feed them. And on the second day, they fed some of the soldiers around the house. And on the early morning hours of the third day, a soldier comes up to the house. I don't know if he comes to the back window or one of the side doors or the front door and asks if there's anything to eat. And Jennie had, while it was still dark out before light, they went out and they got some firewood. They started the stove, and she is preparing dough for bread or biscuits in the kitchen. Her sister is on the bed. The family's huddled around the bed in the parlor of the house. And just before Jennie is killed, bullets come through the window. One bullet hits the bedpost and drops near George's pillow, I think it said. And bullets hit the wall and the mantle. So it's not like it's just a single bullet. There were bullets hitting the side of the house, and some were crashing through the windows. On the evening before, an artillery shell actually came through the roof during the bombardment and put a hole in the partition in the upper part of the house and came through the house.
Right.
So the house is being rocked by the effect of the battle. And, just because we're talking all about it, it's about 8:30 in the morning of July 3rd when a bullet goes through the outside door, through a thin panel, and then actually passes through a door that they had opened between the parlor and the kitchen. And Jennie was behind that door kneading the dough, and it passed through the door and hit her, and she was killed instantly.
And just to put into perspective, perhaps, why Jennie would have been doing that at this time when there was fire going on around her.
Yes, that
is
boggles
that
my
it
mind.
had been hot. It was going to be, it was about 80 degrees the day before. So she wanted to get the baking done, being in front of that fire early in the day. So you have to think about life then. Some people might say, well, what in the world was she doing that for? Well, she really, I think, didn't anticipate that she was going to be back midday in the heat of the day in front of that stove, in front of that fire. So she wanted to get that done first thing. So I think even though she anticipated that the fire that was going on, the firing was light, and she could get it done, get that baked, get the soldiers prepared for it, and then get out of the kitchen.
I hear this, and I just, something in me is saying, what in the hell is wrong with these people? Why do you have a newborn and a weak mother in a bed in the front parlor by a window facing the enemy lines? Why are you concerned about getting an early start on baking the bread? I would be thinking, how the hell am I going to get my family out of here? Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm not giving them the benefit of some doubt that I'm not thinking of. But I'm hearing the stories that you're telling and that Tim's telling, all the circumstances of it, and I don't know if it's the Papa Bear in me or whatever, but I'm like, get my family out of here. And I'll bust a hole in the wall if I have to myself with my own head to do it. But
Matt,
what?
It is a brick house.
Yeah, I know that. That's my point. I don't understand how you could be, whatever. But that's not the point of this. So okay, the fact is she's dead. They're all dead. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but go ahead.
Although I would say, just to take a breath here, I think that the core question that you are asking is a core question of human nature.
Yeah.
Of what decisions do we make, did they make in 1863, and do we make today when we know a hurricane or a tornado is coming or fires are invading our county. So
Okay.
it doesn't. So.
But-
And you can see a variety of decisions that are made by people
Sure.
digging in
Yeah,
today.
but a hurricane is coming and it's miles away, and it's easy to look around and go, oh, it's not going to be that bad. But when bullets are crashing into the house, that's where you're like, it's here. What do we do? Get out, run. That's what's bugging me.
It's
like
too late.
It's too late.
So lay on the floor.
There aren't extra doors for them or windows for them to go out.
Right.
They're
No,
trapped.
At what
they're
point?
When we
trapped.
first
Okay.
came to this house, the shots
No, I
weren't
understand that.
being
Yeah,
fired.
but I'm saying, okay, firefight is going on. I think I'm going to go need some dough. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a disconnect somewhere there that's just not making sense to me.
I don't know. As I'm listening to this,
Yes,
they've
Bob.
made the decision to stay.
Yes.
Because it seems like if there's soldiers talking through the windows or through the front door asking for food in the morning, at night, there was opportunity for them to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, but where?
Anywhere.
There is hell breaking out to the southwest. You could
Sure.
hear it yesterday, way southwest of here, with Longstreet's first assault.
Mm-hmm.
Last night, shoot, half mile away or less at Culp's Hill.
Sure.
You could hear it over there. So to the southeast, it came from the north on the first day to the southwest. The only place you could go was over that hill, over
Yeah.
the Baltimore Pike. And I'm just putting myself in their shoes. I've had a baby 4 days ago. Well, by this time, 6 days ago. Do we know was there any medical complications? Was the
Well,
baby
it's the thought, right?
weak?
Isn't it?
Well, we don't know. Think about July. We're thinking about human nature and how people feel. Think about July 4th. July 4th is Georgia Wade McClellan's 22nd birthday. And she's standing with her infant child over the open grave of her sister. What's going through her mind on July 4th?
What do you got there, Eric?
So here's my deal. I'm just looking at this from a purely tactical standpoint. You've got people that are trapped on the wrong side of the house with a whole lot of guys shooting in this direction. Where are you going to evacuate them to? Probably up the hill. The problem is the hill is like, I don't know, it's probably 125 yards to the top of the hill from here, and it's wide open space with all those guys over there shooting at them. And Jennie Wade's sister she's had some potential complications. I know postpartum bleeding was a huge deal that killed a whole lot of people back then. So do you really want to try to take the chance of jostling that woman 125 yards up the hill, even on a litter? Being carried on a litter is not stable at all, where you could potentially loosen whatever blood clot is holding the whole works together right now.
I don't think we're going to convince Matt.
And potentially getting shot in the back on the way up the hill.
No, you're not going to convince me all this stuff because you save your family. That's what you do. I'm sorry. I'm old-fashioned. I like to save my family from bullets.
Risk.
What?
It's a calculated
Yes,
risk.
it's a calculated risk.
You get
I would
shot
rather
in the
risk
back
going that
up the
way.
hill and potentially making poor Georgia bleed to death in the process. Where do you hunker down in the brick house that's right here? There's no good option. There's just which one is going to be less risky. And
Well, let me ask you
But
this.
Matt,
Yeah.
I think that one of the points I would make to you is that we tend to forget that they didn't know the story then
True.
the way we
True.
know the story now.
Yes.
So if you picture the scenario for them, the loud sounds, the bullets coming from various directions,
yeah.
where is safe?
Yeah.
I don't think that they knew where safe
I understand
was.
that. I understand that.
And they are, as Tim mentioned, and I would go with what Tim said, they are in a brick house.
Yes,
To go out
yes.
on a litter somewhere in an open field.
I don't know.
I'm with you, Cindy.
Okay.
Matt, have a baby,
All
and
right.
then we'll have this
Well,
we
that's
should,
the
we should
thing.
move
I
on.
don't
we
have
should
a
move on.
baby.
We got some
Okay.
nice questions by
Yeah,
the
we
listeners.
do. So, okay, so she dies. finally, and they bury her initially. First of all, she dies. Her mother screams, hears her go clunk on the floor. Her mother comes running downstairs, screams. Soldiers that were upstairs come running down too, and then they carry her body upstairs through the hole that the shell made. Is that right?
They enlarge the hole made by the shell. I think it's kind of a small hole, and they bust through the wall,
yeah.
And they make a passage, and they go down to the McLean side of the house, and then they go in the other cellar, the McLean cellar.
So, just to prove a point, they're able to get somebody from the north side to the south side without leaving the house, but that person has to be dead before they think to bust a hole in the
There's
wall.
a little more motivation.
Right, she's dead.
Right. There's a little more motivation.
Bullets. The sharpshooter action actually was more violent in the afternoon of the third day than it was in the morning. So, I will guarantee you, after they were put to the cellar, and we don't have any accounts specifically of soldiers in the house, but I bet you the Union Army fills the whole side of the house with soldiers, and then there's just massive action after that.
Okay,
Tim, do you know where the Confederate shell, or was it solid shot, came from? Would it have been Benner's Hill?
Probably near the seminary from the angle.
Okay.
There were cannons on July 2nd from the seminary that were firing across, and it probably was one of those.
Okay.
So they take the body through, initially to the basement, right?
Yes.
And then they bury her in the garden behind the house.
Yes.
What, Star? You raised your hand. Star is the manager of Jennie Wade House. She's now motioning. Don't acknowledge me, but say hello.
Hi.
Okay. There you go. That's all. You don't know. What were you going to say? What were you motioning?
No, I was just going to say she was buried in George's garden.
Okay. And is that right there where Eric's standing now?
Right over there.
Oh, it's on the east side of the house.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of like where the gift shop.
Where the gift shop is now. Yeah. So my question is, I forget where I read this, but did they bury her in a coffin that was intended for General Barksdale?
No. Well, I mean, you might have read that because Ina Garlick says that in her civilian account after the war. It's just not accurate. Isaac Avery. The coffin is designated for Isaac Avery. And for whatever reason, when Ina Garlick writes her account of the battle afterwards, and that's a long story, but Ina Garlick marries Jacob Kitzmiller, who buys part of the Jennie Wade House in 1867.
Okay.
So she actually lives in the Jennie Wade House when she's writing this, and Ina Garlick says that it's Barksdale's coffin, but no. Isaac Avery was killed in the attack on July 2nd on East Cemetery Hill, and members of his unit are making a coffin for him at Daniel Culp's carpentry shop, which is next to the Adams County Courthouse. And, of course, they have to flee the town. They find the coffin there. They repurpose it, and she's buried in that coffin.
Okay. Now we're getting it. Bob, turn your mic on.
There's a few things. I think basically the account says a North Carolina officer high in rank.
Okay.
So it doesn't specifically
say Isaac, but it's
reasonable. Isaac Avery. And
you
might know that Isaac Avery's body is put in a wagon and taken south with them when they go into town at the last moment.
And they would have had no reasonable expectation to get Barksdale's body.
No. Yeah, and honestly, the ridiculous part of that story is Barksdale's behind the Union lines.
Right.
The Southerners don't have Barksdale.
Yeah, right.
He fell in the Union Army, and they don't even know he's dead. He doesn't,
because he dies on July 3rd too, but
in a Humble Ball.
Yeah, behind the Union line. So the Southerners don't even know anything about him.
And why would the Northern Army have a coffin made for him?
Yeah, it's not.
That's why it didn't make sense.
It's just a mistake.
Okay.
So to return to the tragic scene here in the garden on George's 22nd birthday, Independence Day, July 4th, it had rained a couple of times that day, and they were wanting to get Jennie's body in the grave, and they buried her on July 4th. She remained here at this house until January, where she was moved to the German Reformed Church. And she remained there for 2 years, and then her family had her moved to the family plot in the Evergreen Cemetery, which is where her grave is today.
Okay. So, where was I going to go with that? Okay. Now, so we've got to the end of her life, her burial. Now, a lot of people are interested in the story of her and Jack Skelly. And I seem to remember when I first started coming here, there seemed to be implications of, if not people outright saying that there was some love triangle with Jack, Jennie, and Wes Culp. But
that's not true. But
no, yeah.
This is why I was not going to co-host.
Wait, hold on. You plug your mic in, Bob. It keeps coming out. Make sure it stays in there.
Well, I think Wes Culp is an interesting part of the story,
but he's come because of that.
I don't think there's any evidence that Wesley and Jennie like each other or anything like that. They're just friends.
Okay, because they all grew up together.
So it's a triangle, but it's not a love triangle.
They're friends.
Yeah.
So they all grew up together. Wes moved down to Virginia before the war, and then joined the Confederate Army.
Well, one thing I don't know if a lot of people point this out, but Jennie's father is a tailor. Jack Skelly's father is a tailor. Wesley Culp's father is a tailor. They're all tailors in Gettysburg at the same time.
Right, okay.
And Jennie had actually been a seamstress for Jack Skelly's father at one point in time, so they were all tied together just by the trade.
But Jennie and Jack, though, were in communication with each other. They would write letters to each other.
Let me give you the basic framework of the story,
Go ahead.
As I know it now. The story that Jennie Wade has a boyfriend in the Union Army actually is first told in the 1870s, and I think there's an 1880s version of it. And it's actually guys from the Gettysburg GAR. Our local GAR is named Johnston H. Skelly Post number 9, and they actually start promoting this story about the fact that they were engaged to be married. And then as time goes by, people kind of poo-pooed the story and said, yeah, I don't know about that. And eventually someone ran across Jack Skelly's pension file to National Archives. To the best of my knowledge, this was done by a member of the Gettysburg Civil War Roundtable in the 1960s. And when they looked at Jack Skelly's pension file, lo and behold, there are letters from Jack to his mother in the pension file. And the purpose of the letters is that Jack's mom was trying to collect a pension on his Civil War service. And to do that, she had to prove that her son was supporting her during the war. So these letters she sent in have mentions in them, I'm sending you $5.
Oh, nice.
And oh, by the way, I hear you've been talking about Jennie. And in the letters, it's obvious that Jennie and Jack have some sort of relationship, and that Jack's mother doesn't really approve of Jack and Jennie's relationship, and Jack's mom is trying to cause trouble in their relationship by sending him things like, hey, you should have saw who Jennie was with the other night, or, this and that. And in one letter, Jack tells his mother to stop it. He's tired of the gossip. And he says that he doesn't trust any of it. As a matter of fact, one really neat line in one of the letters is, I don't trust the people of Gettysburg past a worthless set of dogs. So he's angry with his mother, and he tells her to stop the nonsense. He doesn't want to hear anything about it. And he says that Jennie and him have talked about it. But from those letters...
And she admitted, though, that she did... Yeah, I was with so-and-so or whatever, but we were hanging out.
The worst thing she's accused of in any of these letters is keeping Culp late.
Yes.
Meaning company. And it obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Cindy, it's members of the 10th New York Cavalry that are stationed in Gettysburg in the winter of 61-62. So we have that. But... when you read that into it, I think what I got out of those letters is that Jack likes Jennie, but we don't know how Jennie feels about Jack. There's one letter that we knew about from Jennie to Jack, and it doesn't really give much indication of the situation. And then, recently, within about 5, I don't even know how long ago, let's say 7 years ago, a guy in Baltimore died, and he had letters. He was related to the Skellys, and his letters were sent to a cousin in Lancaster, and she brought them to light. And these letters, 8 letters from Jennie to Jack, And this is all stuff that we didn't know about, and Cindy didn't know anything about when she wrote her book. So I'm curious. I don't know how much we've talked about. I'm curious what Cindy might think about the revelation of these new letters. And I have a few quotes I can read from letters and talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about how do you feel about the discovery?
I think that it sheds more light on how Jennie felt in terms of she was more fond of Jack than I thought at the time that I did the research. At the time that I did the research, the way that she signed her letters to him were "your true friend and well-wisher." And I thought,
That's pretty vague.
That doesn't sound like
Yeah.
she's really falling head over
Total
heels.
friend zone.
Right.
Yeah.
But through these new letters, I thought, I think that she did have more of a soft spot for him, but it wasn't really blatant still. I mean, so.
But there were clues that it's more than friends.
There were clues. I mean, I know that she was very anxious. She was encouraging him to get furlough so that he could come home, so that she could see him. So there were little hints, but I think that she was being careful to. I don't know if it was to not get hurt or didn't know how he felt, or how things were going to work
like
out
just
here.
testing the waters. But wasn't there something in there, Tim? I remember you telling me.
I'm really
wrote down a
curious
few
to see how
passages
Tim.
here, and you can
go ahead.
think
Give
about
us
some
a
passages.
yeah.
But I think what's really I'm with Cindy when she wrote her book. My thought was that Jack liked her and she didn't like him.
Yes.
And now I read these
too.
letters, and now I'm thinking she likes Jack and Jack doesn't like her. I don't know. Okay, but here's a couple of the quotes. Here's one I just threw in here. This is from November 1861. Jennie to Jack. There is a great many that will never see home again. If they should fall, I hope they will find a home in heaven and admittance to God's right hand in glory. And I mention that because we know that Jennie Wade is confirmed at the St. James Church. We know she was baptized. We know she went to church. And I think that some of the people that downplay, they try to make it sound as if Jennie's really not that religious and we're just making that part up. But no, she is. But here is a quote from March 8th, 1863. And how I like to preface this is that one of the stories that was told early on and that people bought into is that Jennie and Jack are secretly engaged. And their engagement is supposed to occur in September 1863 if Jack can get a furlough.
Their marriage, you mean?
And the marriage. And I'm always like, oh, yeah, whatever. But in this letter, listen to Jennie. Jack, I have come to the conclusion that I am not smart enough to tell you lies enough to get you a furlough. It requires more than I expected, Jack. I was surprised to think that you would tell me that you were going in the service for 5 years. I have grieved myself so much about you for the last 18 months, and I really think you were getting cold towards me. But, Jack, never will my love change.
Whoa.
Think of the heart of faith that watched with anxious pain for tidings of the health over the divided main. I think it's a poem. Think of the loving heart, true and writes with tears to you. Jack, I always thought if there would be anyone happy when your 3 years were up, it would be me. If you would be living, but if it is your wish to grieve me to death, it is my wish for you to go on board a vessel, Jack. I mean, I think she wants to go into the Navy. If I could only see you, but it is no use to say, I am yours now till 3 years is up. So Jack re-enlisted, and this is what she's upset about.
Huh. So
that sounds like she's pretty serious about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then here's the thing I have to tell that now this might be, for the ears of our listeners, this might be a little much.
Well, this is a good part.
And I'll preface this with saying I was just telling everybody that there is a letter that is ripped up and it's scratched out that we can't read. And Daniel Skelly, Jack's younger brother, wrote later on it at some time, I have torn up this letter, and he said something like, boy and girl talk. not for prying eyes.
Oh.
What did he rip out of a letter?
Right.
Because what I'm going to read right here, he didn't rip this out.
Now, Tim, before you read that and build to the crescendo, I'll remember a letter that you just read one from March. There was one that she wrote him in February, just a month before.
Yep.
That might be what you had there.
Yep.
Where she's remembering. She's saying, "I'm remembering today,
That's
where
what I was
a
asking
year
about.
ago in February," and she just implies that there was something that exchanged between the two of them that
That's what I'm
made
gonna
an
read.
indelible mark
Yes.
on her. Am I building up?
I'll
for what
read
you're
it,
gonna
and then
read?
you can tell me what you
Okay.
think it suggests.
All right.
It's written on February 22nd, 1863, Washington's birthday.
Okay.
And I should tell you, Washington's birthday is a huge celebration for our local militia units, and Jack's in the Independent Blues, the local militia. So he was in a parade, and then after the parade, there's usually a dance for the Independent Blues with
Talking
all their girlfriends.
1861.
So she's going to talk about 2 years ago. So she's going to be talking about 1861. Jack, what does the 22nd of February bring to your mind? It brings to my mind more than Washington's birthday. I remember this day 2 years ago as well as I remember it yesterday. I wish I could see you just half as often today as I did that day. I would be satisfied. I wish one more 22nd were over, and then it would not be long till you will be home for good. But do try and get a furlough home if you can get one.
Sounds like it was a magical Washington's birthday.
So, I mean, I think at the very least, we can assume that at that, Jack professed his love to her on that 22nd of February, 1861, and that's what she's referring to.
That's what you were thinking.
At the very least.
Oh, at the very least. All right, good. My mind went a lot further than that, but okay.
Oh, Matt, I'm with Tim on that.
You are?
I am,
Oh,
yes.
Jesus. Okay. Fine. All right, I'm outruled.
I think you know what's
here.
really funny from our perspective. I mean, and both Cindy and I have been here for a long time and been around town for a long time and know the same historians around town for a long time. And you know, I read about Jennie Wade's story, and Cindy wrote about Jennie Wade's story, and then. You know, when I was younger, I encountered people around town telling stories about Jennie Wade, and I was shocked and surprised by the things they said. One of the most shocking was you were in a video, Cindy. I can't remember when it was. I guess it would be like 1993, 1994 for Greystone, and it was about the civilians at Gettysburg, and Cindy was one of the talking heads, and they asked her questions, and she told stories. And another guy in town, we won't mention his name, we're not our purpose to harm
we don't do
his
that.
reputation.
Then, yeah.
But they interviewed him on this, and he said, when they talked to him about it, he said, Jennie, she had boyfriends.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
And then in one of the a little later on, they asked him about it, and she said, you know, she was asking for it.
Get what? Asking for getting shot?
And then, yeah, exactly.
What?
And then there was one
that's-
memorable exchange for me that I had with a lady in town who was a well-respected school teacher, and her grandfather was a battlefield tour guide. And at some point, she learned that I was interested in Jennie Wade, and she said, "You like Jennie Wade?" I'm like, yeah. And she said, "Jennie Wade was a."
Oh.
And this was a lady, I never heard her say a bad word, you know, and I couldn't believe that she had said something like this. I mean, it's just it's a part of the town lore that it still exists, and it's.
But you know, these letters that you read, though, listening to her write, and I said before, Tilly Pierce's account makes her sound like a Jerry Springer guest. But that Jerry Springer guest can't write like that. And I know that there was a higher standard of writing back then for just a sixth grader, let alone whatever she was. But still, you still have to. That shows an intelligence. That shows an emotional intelligence and a way to communicate it. And the thing that you said you think might be a poem. I'm guessing she didn't write that. She's quoting a poem, probably, right?
I think she's quoting a poem.
Yeah. So whatever poem that is, you know, she's read. So I got a totally different picture of her than what I've had for 20 years. And because, like you're saying, you talk to people around town, yeah, she was a slut, or yeah, she was this, or yeah, she was that, or oh, she was trash, or whatever. But now that there's more information coming out, and you find out that maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was a good old girl after all, and she just was living under the cloud of her father's reputation or something, and unfairly treated.
The experience of writing this book for me as a person who grew up here amidst a couple of generations in my family who worked for the National Park Service and were battlefield guides and were telling various stories about the Battle of Gettysburg. I was around people who would bring up the subject of Jennie Wade and and they would describe her as she had a loose reputation. She was a whore. Words that I probably shouldn't have even said that.
You heard that too from your friends.
I did hear that. Those were not told within my family, but those were stories that I heard. And so, when I did the research to write this book, at that point in time, I was surrounded by historians who were my friends and my coworkers, and the pressure was really on to not make a mistake in writing this book. I had to report the facts because I was going to become a laughingstock then among my friends. And so I was really adamant and serious about only reporting in my book what I could find backup information sources for. And so it was an eye-opener for me that I could not find anything that would reinforce those loose reputations of Jennie. And I wanted to backtrack and go back and tell a lot of those people who had been continuing the gossip that I really needed. I wouldn't respect them until I could hear that they had found the same the sources, not to just spread gossip. One thing, though, that I would say that I was kind of curious about when Tim was pointing out those letters, it almost now I had almost a visual as he was reading it as a cluster of letters that had been kept together in a collection that were unlike some of the other letters that Jennie had written that were elsewhere. And it just gave me a little bit of a sense of curiosity. Again, I would want to follow the facts and see if I could find this to be true. But it just made me wonder if the family kept some collections of letters that reinforced what they wanted to believe, which is that they weren't engaged. That because his mother did not want to reinforce the relationship.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know off the top of my head too much about the Skelly family itself, but Daniel Skelly, Jack Skelly's younger brother, when he retired, I think maybe a position at the post office in Gettysburg in the early 1930s. There was a letter in the newspaper about it, maybe the mid-1930s, and it said, in the bottom of the paragraph, it said, Daniel Skelly has a pack of love letters written to his brother from Jennie Wade. And I always thought about that and wondered where it ever became of those letters. Now, as my understanding, Daniel Skelly has a son named Daniel Skelly Jr., and he lives in Baltimore. But there was another Skelly branch that lived in Lancaster, and they're the ones that William Frastinito knew, who went to, got photographs for his book, Early Photography at Gettysburg, got a letter from Jack, from Jennie to Jack, and put it in his book. But this guy in Baltimore had died, a grandson or a great grandson of Dan Skelly, and in part of his will, I think they said these letters were sent to a cousin in Lancaster, and this Lancaster family all of a sudden received these 8 letters that they didn't know existed before. And then it was an unusual story as how it happened. Was a lady was writing a book about Jennie Wade and Jack Skelly, and she came to the Adams County Historical Society, and at my suggestion, she contacted Lancaster people because I knew they had a picture of Dan Skelly, and I knew they had that one Jennie Wade letter, and she went there, and she happened to go there after they just received these letters from the Baltimore family, and then she put them in her book on Jack Skelly and Jennie Wade and transcribed the letters, and that was a few years ago now. I'm reluctant to mention a book because I disagree with most of the things she says in it. on not the stuff we're talking about in other parts of it. But I just think it's fascinating. I am fascinated that we're telling the story. I never in a million years would have thought that these letters would come to light, and then boom, here they are.
Right, and that's what's so cool about it.
And should we mention that you can see the letters? The Lancaster family sold them to Eric Dorr at the Gettysburg Museum of History, and he has them on display in a case in his museum, and you can see the letters, and even see the little piece of the letter, the one I'm talking about that he ripped up that had the boy and girl stuff.
Yeah, that I want to see. Bob, did you push the thing in again? It's not. Is the power button on?
You go do the.
All right, there you go.
Bring Wesley Culp into this at some point. What's his connection?
Well, what is his connection? What is Wesley's connection to everything?
We didn't have him in here, okay.
No, we didn't mention him.
So Wesley Culp is a Gettysburg boy who grew up here. He was born actually near York Springs, but grew up, spent most of his time in Gettysburg. And prior to the outbreak of the war, his mother had died. He moved to Virginia with the carriage industry. At the outbreak of the war, joined a Virginia infantry unit. And 2 weeks prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, at a place called Winchester, the 2nd Virginia Infantry faces off against the 87th Pennsylvania, Company F being from Gettysburg. The two units met face-to-face. Wesley Culp is in the 2nd Virginia. His brother, William, is in the 87th Pennsylvania. Two brothers fight against each other. After the battle's over, Wesley's walking along, and there wounded on the battlefield is Jack Skelly. And Jack basically asked Wesley, if you get the opportunity and you're ever back in Gettysburg, could you deliver a message to my family?
Right.
And tell them that I'm wounded and, I don't know what's going to happen. And Wesley Culp has that message with him. He comes through the town of Gettysburg on the evening of July 1st. And that's one thing that we know more about since Cindy's book has come out. There's an article in December 1863 Gettysburg newspaper that mentions it was on the evening of July 1st that Wesley visits his sister in town. Both of his parents had died by that time, and he tells his sister he has a message for Jack's mom.
But we don't know what that is.
And we don't know what it is. And then Wesley rejoins his unit. He's killed in the fighting somewhere east of town on July 2nd or July 3rd and never delivers the message. Now, later, much more recently, people start to suggest that the message is actually for Jennie Wade. But that is in nothing. That is in none of the early stuff.
But why are they? Based on what? Why are they suggesting that?
The first I think I see of it is in the 1913 article by Fleming, who interviews people about Wesley Culp. Wesley Culp's sister, I guess it's Wesley Culp's niece, says that she heard her mom always thought that part of the message was for Jennie Wade. And then later in the 1930s, there's an article that comes out in the York newspaper, and Myers family, Anna Culp had married a Myers. She writes about it, this granddaughter, and says the message was for Jennie Wade.
Okay.
So this is a family a story that the Myers family starts, but it's not in any of the early accounts that the Wesley Culp thing has anything to do with Jennie Wade. It just makes for a better story.
Right. Okay.
Think outside the bus and let Getty's Bike Tours show you the only way to truly experience Gettysburg. There's a reason why Getty's Bike Tours is the longest running bicycle tour company in Gettysburg, and that's because they put the customer's experience at the top of their list of priorities. Follow a licensed battlefield guide through some of the most legendary ground in American history. There's a tour route for everyone, from the newbie to the hardcore history buff. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book your reservation today. Mention addressing Gettysburg and receive 10% off your tour. That's gettysbike.com or 717-752-7752. Discount does not apply to rentals.
Gettysburg, a nation divided. The battle that changed America. Avatars, generals, artifacts, games, 360-degree views. An immersive battlefield experience. A new way to discover history. Gettysburg, A Nation Divided. An augmented reality narrated by Scott Eastwood.
Download it from your phone's app store today and support Addressing Gettysburg by entering GBurg1863 in the referral code prompt after downloading. So, let's get into some questions from the audience here. Star, thank you for your patience. It's taking a little longer than we thought, but I had to go on my tirade about getting my family out of the house. All right, let's see. Serge Bielanco asked, does Jennie Wade still have any descendants who live in Gettysburg or Adams County anymore? And if so, do any of those folks take an active interest in her history or actively participate in her legacy somehow?
No.
All right.
She doesn't. You want to? I'll just give
elaborate.
All her brothers and sisters move away. Her mother dies. There are descendants of Jennie Wade's sisters and brothers that are living in various parts of the country, and I have corresponded with a few of them. And every once in a while, one of them comes back to Gettysburg, and there's an article in the paper or something. And have you met some of the descendants?
Yes, I have. Some of them are from Denison, Iowa. Some are in Saskatchewan, Canada. And there is a Facebook page
the lady
on the
in Canada
genealogy.
I have met.
Yeah, I have met her as well. There is a genealogy page on Facebook, genealogy of the Wade and McClellan families, and some of them have reunions, and they keep the story going.
I hate to do this, but I think it is important. Earlier, we were talking about my Jennie Wade conspiracy theory. We were? And I think there's a piece of information that you said at the beginning of the show, Tim, and you just said that I think kind of proves my theory, which I didn't realize at this point, but I had to look it up. And here we go. For the sake of the audience, I'll do it real quick. Jennie didn't die. All right, it was a servant girl that they doubled her body. They wanted to get her out. Okay, Wesley Culp didn't die. Well, everybody's walking away with what? Wesley Culp didn't die. He came for Jennie. He said, "Hey, Jennie, Jack's out of the picture. Let's you and I run off together and ditch this crazy war." And they run off to the west, and they change their name to Morrison, and they have a couple of kids. And one of those kids goes on to get married and has who we would all later know as John Wayne. Now, why is that important? Because John Wayne was born in Iowa. That's my point. He was born in Iowa, and there are Wades in Iowa. There you go. So I think my conspiracy theory might actually hold some water. All right. Sorry, Cindy.
I just want all of the listeners to know that everyone has left the room but me holding the mic to respond to the conspiracy theory.
We're not in a room.
Thank you, Bob.
We're outside, and we're socially distancing ourselves from Matt's theory.
Well, since Bob spoke up, why don't you save the day then, Bob, since you spoke up there?
Let's go to another question then. Spencer Frogner. He says, I was informed on a tour about a decade ago at the Farnsworth house that the bullet that killed Jennie Wade had originated from the sniper's nest in the attic. Basically, do we buy this? We don't really know where the bullet came from, right?
That's right.
Right. Because there's no way to really tell because the hotel is blocking the hole. Number one. And number two, the hole has had people putting their ring fingers in it for so long that it probably doesn't even bear any marks of the original trajectory anyway.
That's right.
Right. So it would be very hard to kind of figure that out.
Yes.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I'm not a forensics guy, but all right. One more person here. Now, Cindy, this might be good for you here because she's got a few questions. And she loves this topic. So her name is Maria.
Is this
Maria Black.
Maria Black.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got a lot of questions, and she apologized in advance, but we're going to go through them here. Jennie Wade died on July 3rd, and Jack died on July 12th. Do we know if Jack was informed of her death prior to his? If so, how was he informed?
The answer is no. Jack was not informed.
Okay. And what was the relationship like between Jack and Wesley? I think I remember saying they were best friends. How did the war change this relationship?
They were very close friends. The way that it changed the relationship, I know that Jack and Wesley, Wesley's friends didn't understand why, his friends from Gettysburg didn't understand why he fought for the Confederacy. That
Right.
was one thing. But they still remained friends and they still remained close.
Because he's been gone for a few years already, because he left in the 1850s.
Yes.
And a bunch of other Gettysburg boys left with him.
Right.
Because Hoffman was the carriage maker they worked for here. And then he moved down to Shepherdstown, Virginia, and offered them work if they would come, and they said, "Yeah, what the hell?"
That's right.
And they go down.
They
but
worked.
then the war breaks out.
Right. But they worked together. They socialized together.
Right.
They even joined a group of the guards together.
Right.
But when
The
the war,
Hamtramck guards you're
that's
talking about,
Hamtramck,
yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
And when the war broke out, his friends decided all to come home, but he decided to
So
stay.
he's
and
the
they never,
only one that
he's
stayed?
the only one that we know of. And his friends just still continued to say that they just didn't understand why he didn't come home with them. I don't think, though, that fractured the friendship between Jack and Wesley.
Did he?
Clearly, when Wesley got word in Winchester that Jack was wounded, he immediately went to
Right.
see him
Right.
and then sought medical help for him immediately. I mean, that
Yeah.
just shows a sense of loyalty and friendship
Sure.
there, continuing through.
Did we know? Did Wesley ever give a reason for why he fought for the Confederacy?
I'm not aware of that. I don't know if Tim knows that, but
Do you know that, Tim? Now Tim's
mostly-
back.
mostly
Apparently,
through
my story
mostly
scared
through
him
the
off.
research that I had, it was left with that his friends just didn't understand why he made that decision.
Okay, but he never. Do you know
I
that,
don't know if
Wes?
he ever
I think
explained
that
it to
is
his
interesting.
family.
I think that's a question that we struggle with for all soldiers that. Southerners that lived in the North that joined the Northern Army, or Northerners that lived in the South that joined the Southern Army. I know there's a guy, Bob O'Connell, wrote a novel about Wesley Culp, and I think he makes a suggestion that Wesley fell in love with a Southern girl.
All right, well,
But,
that'll do it.
I mean, I don't think we have any evidence one way or another.
Okay, so was Jack ever informed of Wesley's death? What? No.
No, Jack. Yeah. Well, does Jack ever know about Jennie's death? Did you already ask that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not that we know of. Yeah. So neither. There would be no. Wesley was reported as missing. So, and he's buried in an unknown grave. I don't know. I don't know when they determined he was killed. You know, I don't know if. And besides that, in Winchester, Virginia, in a hospital, they're not sharing the list of Confederate casualties. Oh, one thing is interesting. I am pretty sure now that Jennie knows Jack is missing. Members of the 87th Pennsylvania came through the town of Gettysburg prior to the battle, and so there's a suggestion in something that I think Georgia wrote that Jennie does go down to Mrs. Skelly and ask if she has any news about Jack.
Okay.
So Jennie may know that Jack is been wounded. She, at the very least, she may know that he's missing in action.
Okay.
From the,
all right.
Or captured.
Okay. And then the last question was, I heard that a few years back the House had people come out to figure out exactly where the bullet was shot from. We kind of covered this before. Could you talk a little bit about that? What was that story where they had people come out to try to figure out?
I don't think that's true. I don't know. I hear that all the time. Oh, yeah. Down at the Farnsworth House, they say, yeah, we had FBI people, and I have never seen any group of any legitimate people. The one guy.
Wait, who says they have had FBI people? The Farnsworth House?
Well, I'm just saying people at the Farnsworth House have said to me that, they investigated the path of the bullet and found that it came from here. I'm like, I don't think so. Part of I think it would be pretty easy. All we need to do is knock down the Holiday Inn, and then we'll be able to shoot a laser, down the street. I think it's a legitimate thing. No, I think we could bring experts in. I think it might be like, a TV documentary we could do on Jennie Wade.
I'll bet you, even with the hotel there, they could, with a laser or one of those poles they use, they could use the two holes and figure out what the trajectory is from there, and then
there's some issues with this, obviously. There's two doors, and both the doors have a hole. And, there's all this speculation that the doors may not be, have you heard that the doors aren't the real doors, or the height has changed of the doors, and all these kind of things. And then the other thing is, the Civil War muskets, is the bullet... I'd be interested. Is the bullet rising slightly? Is the bullet falling slightly? Is it what kind of trajectory it's on? How far was it fired away?
And as Cindy and I were talking before, people have stuck their finger in that outside one so many times that any angle of the bullet that you could glean from the hole might not be there. It's you know what I mean. It's just all worn away.
And I don't know if Cindy mentioned this, but the first account we have of Jennie Wade's death, the earliest account, says that she was killed by Union sharpshooters. And then the other account, the more later accounts that talk about her death, says she's killed by a sharpshooter from the Rupp Tannery, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's not an area. And it's easy for people to walk down the street and see bullet holes in the Farnsworth house and see the window up there and say, oh, she was shot from that window. In 1973, I'm thinking it was, Eugene Sickles, a battlefield tour guide, a member of the Gettysburg Fire Department. Did you ever meet Eugene Sickles? Your dad was probably good friends with him. Yeah. Eugene Sickles came to the Farnsworth house. So it had to be after Loring Bar, so like 73, 74, 75. And then he became convinced the bullet came from the attic window. At the Farnsworth house, we have a diorama that Eugene Sickles made with buildings on it. And he measured it. It's 612 feet between the attic window and the door. Do you know that's 612 feet? And I have a drawing he made showing the trajectory of the bullet. So it was Eugene Sickles who was responsible for the legend today that the bullet came from the Farnsworth house. But again, I think this plays into the idea that there's one sharpshooter and it's an accidental shot, and it went through the door. And the fact is, there are dozens, like I said, if not 100 sharpshooters all across the edge of the town in different locations, behind fences and windows, on top of roofs, and they're all firing up here, and these guys are all firing back, and, who knows where the bullet came from.
It brings up a line that I read today when I was reading about history in general, and it said, most of those who tell the stories of history were never there.
Good point. Bob, were you going to say something?
Just that right across the street from Mr. G's, there was the twin house there facing the other direction. And I think a guy from the 8th Louisiana, William Poole, was found dead in the back door.
Yeah.
And that could easily be a shot, too. I don't know how you're going to figure this out.
No.
There's that table at the visitor center with a hole in the table that William Poole was killed behind.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's got to be hard to figure out because you've got bullets coming from, whatever. I don't know. It's, it'll just be one of those mysteries that we'll never know.
I still think we need to get a documentary crew out here, and we need to get some computer equipment, and we can at least come up with a range of places the bullet could have come from, right?
I'm sure there's somebody out there listening that has some kind of criminology or forensics. We'll get a bidding war
between the Farnsworth House and Mr. G's to sponsor the research.
Yeah.
Because it's going to help someone's business.
And whoever outbids the other one is the place the bullet came from.
And undoubtedly, sharpshooters were in the Farnsworth House window.
Yeah.
So and these other windows. So it doesn't. I don't. Is it an honor to be the spot where the bullet came from?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Maybe you pay more to not be.
I don't know.
Anyway. I am curious, though. I see that as Maria Black was writing, she said that this is absolutely. She feels like this is Christmas morning that we're talking about this, and that Jennie Wade is her absolutely number one favorite topic. And I would love to know more. Why is that? Because I'm always so curious about why people are interested in Jennie Wade. So maybe we can hear back another time from Maria.
You know what I say for my personal story? I think it was 1970. So I'm like 6.5, 7 years old. And my dad and my family are in Gettysburg, and he takes us to the Avenue Restaurant. And I'm sitting in the Avenue Restaurant in the front window there, and we're getting ready to go on the battlefield. I'm really excited. And I went over to the brochure rack, and there's a brochure about Jennie Wade. And so I pulled the Jennie Wade House brochure out. I'm reading it about her death, and I look out the window, and here's the Jennie Wade House.
Oh, neat.
Thousands of men are killed in the battle, whatever. But here's a girl that's in her house, and just unexpectedly, a bullet comes through the door and hits her in the back, and she's killed, and her life is snuffed out like that. And it's a tragic story, and that resonated with me.
I think that's what resonates with a lot of people.
I agree. An ordinary person under extraordinary circumstances, and what do you do, and what would you do? And just to expand on your story a little bit, Tim, I had mentioned before that I had grown up here, but another part of that is I had worked in the bookstore at the visitor center, and there were no books specifically about Jennie Wade that were on sale in the National Park Service Visitor Center bookstore. And the manager of the store mentioned that they really could use a book about Jennie Wade because they were having so many people come in there expressing interest about the story, wanted to know more about it, and they were looking for a book. So the book that I wrote came out in 1990. I wrote it in 1990, 1991. So if you think about that, the story of Jennie was perpetuated for all of those years without a lot of books out, that it took that long. And now, luckily, Tim has done even more expanded, in-depth research, and hopefully will grace us with a book about Jennie Wade.
That would be
what do you think, Tim?
Well, one of the things that's going to be in my book, which will be interesting to people, is not just the before and the after and the story of Jennie Wade's death, but I, just like when I wrote a book on John Burns, I am intrigued by the way the Jennie Wade story has been handled over the years. And I have one after another interpreted story that someone tries to push in the newspaper about her or her death. So I'm going to talk about all the lore and the legend surrounding the Jennie Wade House also over the years. And, in 1901, Robert Miller had the foresight to open up the Jennie Wade House Museum. Now, just to give you a little perspective, so Jennie and her family, Georgia left the house probably by 1864. The north side, I think it's the south side of the house, maybe, Jacob Kitzmiller purchased in like 1866, and eventually he purchased the whole house. And Jacob Kitzmiller's daughter married Robert Miller, and he was a businessman, came here, and he opened up the Jennie Wade House, and he would give people tours of the Jennie Wade House, but his main thing was selling relics. It was a free museum. He gave a tour, and then you go inside and you buy relics, and he had a team of kids finding stuff on the battlefield and bringing them here every day, and bullets and stuff found on the battlefield.
Back when you
he
could.
was a really interesting businessman, but there's account after account where he opens up, and people come here, and they just can't believe that he is so good at telling the story and giving the details of the story. And do you know that today the Jennie Wade House is the longest continuously operational museum in the town?
No, that makes sense, though. Okay.
How long's the monument been here to Jennie?
The monument is put up by a guy named Ivo Vini. Is it Ivo Vini? And I think it's in 1988. Do you remember when the monument was put up? Before this, as you mentioned, there was a wax figure they used to have of Jennie, and they would have it out front. But I think they rolled it in at night and put it out. Do you remember the wax figure here?
I do, yes.
So I think it's probably on here. It's probably written on here.
For those of us listening, it's pretty dark for us. We're sitting outside right now, but Tim is going through heroic efforts to find a date in the dark.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's a real big Jennie Wade fan, they might watch the movie Route 30.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the movie is there is a tour guide who's obsessed with Jennie Wade. It kind of hits a little too close to home.
Yeah.
And the Jennie Wade statue in front of the house talks in that movie.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I did see that movie. Mr.
Have
Ed
you
is
seen
in
Route
it.
30?
I have, yes.
Okay.
All right, well,
That's
so...
1984
1984 is the statue, okay. All right, we need to wrap this up. Thank you very much, Star, for letting us come out here, and thanks to Max over at the Tour Center.
You should come to visit the Jennie Wade House.
Absolutely.
When you're in town.
See the Jennie Wade House. It's pretty cool inside. First time I've ever been inside today, and it's pretty cool. It's not the way I pictured it at all. It's really awesome.
And you can get married, right? Stick your ring finger in the bullet hole. You might get killed.
You might get proposed to. Yes.
Get married.
Oh, okay.
You'll get killed before you get married.
Matt, this might be your only chance, buddy.
No, I avoid that thing like the plague. So, Cindy, thank you very much for coming. The name of your book is The Jennie Wade Story.
That's right.
And it's available, I'm sure, on Amazon or anywhere.
It is,
right?
and right here at the Jennie Wade House. So you can come here to the Jennie Wade House and get it.
And it will also be on our recommended reading page on addressinggettysburg.com.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you all for listening. Thank you to our patrons. We hope we see you guys out on October 17th. If you want to be on the Today Show, come on out. And we'll see your beautiful face. Got to bring your mask, though. They won't air any footage unless you have your mask. So bring a mask and put it on your forehead. All right, we'll see you next time.
All right, we made it, folks. I didn't realize my John Wayne theory was so controversial that everybody had to leave.
I was trying to warn you when I said I might not be the co-host.
But why? I still don't understand. You can't explain.
There was a long line at Aurora, Stanford.
Oh, is that what it was?